My name is Michael Warren, 38 years old, and last Christmas changed everything. While I was working a double shift at Mercy Hospital's emergency room, my 16-year-old daughter Audrey faced the unthinkable. A text message flashed on my phone between patients. "Coming home, Dad." Grandma and Grandpa said there was no room for me. My heart dropped. My own parents and sister had turned away my child on Christmas Day, leaving her to drive home alone to an empty house. Before I continue this heartbreaking story, please let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, what happened next changed our family forever. 6 years ago, my world collapsed when my wife Rebecca lost her battle with ovarian cancer. She fought bravely for 18 months, but in the end, the disease was too aggressive. At 32, I became both mother and father to our 10-year-old daughter Audrey. Those early days were a blur of grief, hospital shifts, and trying desperately to help Audrey process her mother's death. Initially, my parents Harold and Eleanor Warren stepped up. They lived about 20 minutes away in the same suburb of Boston, and would often take Audrey after school when my shifts ran late. My younger sister Diana, married with 2 children of her own, also helped occasionally, though her assistance always came with unsolicited parenting advice. "You're not strict enough with her," Michael Diana would say, while watching Audrey do homework. Rebecca would have been more structured. These comments stung, but I brushed them off. After all, they were helping, and I was grateful for any support during those dark months following Rebecca's funeral. My career as an emergency physician had always been demanding, but I managed to arrange my schedule to be present for Audrey's important moments. I made it to every school concert, parent-teacher conference, and even coached her soccer team for 2 seasons. The hospital administration was understanding, allowing me to swap shifts with colleagues when necessary. Still, there were nights when I would come home exhausted after treating everything from heart attacks to car accident victims, only to find Audrey asleep with her homework spread across the kitchen table waiting for my help. Before Rebecca died, Audrey had been outgoing and confident, the kind of child who made friends easily and loved performing in school plays. Grief changed her. She became quieter, more introspective. Around the time she turned 13, she discovered photography. Rebecca had been an amateur photographer, and Audrey found comfort in looking through her mother's old camera equipment. Soon she was carrying a camera everywhere, capturing everything from neighborhood cats to stunning sunset compositions. Photography became her outlet, her way of processing the world. I encouraged this passion, even converting our rarely used dining room into a small studio space where she could edit photos and display her work. My parents, however, viewed this hobby with skepticism. "She spends too much time with that camera," my father would comment during Sunday dinners at their house. "What about practical skills? College applications? Sports?" "Harold, she's expressing herself," I would counter. "The school counselor says creative outlets are healthy for processing grief." My mother would purse her lips but say nothing. Diana, however, always had something to add. "My Jacob is taking advanced placement classes and playing varsity basketball. Colleges look for well-rounded students." Michael. Jacob, my 14-year-old nephew, was indeed accomplished. Diana and her husband Patrick had structured every minute of his life since preschool. Their daughter Amanda, 12, was similarly scheduled with violin lessons, competitive swimming, and accelerated math programs. They were bright, talented kids, but sometimes I wondered if they ever had time to just be children. As the years passed, our Sunday dinners became increasingly tense. What began as occasional suggestions about Audrey's education evolved into constant criticism. My parents and Diana seemed to view my parenting as too permissive, too focused on emotional support rather than achievement. They criticized everything from Audrey's casual clothing style to her quiet demeanor. "She's too shy," Diana would say. "You should sign her up for debate club or something to bring her out of her shell." "She's not shy," I would explain for the 100th time. "She's selective about where she puts her energy." By the time Audrey turned 16 last spring, these family gatherings had become exercises in endurance. I noticed Audrey withdrawing further during visits, answering questions with minimal responses, and escaping to the backyard with her camera whenever possible. Still, I insisted we maintain the connection with my parents and sister. They were our only family after all, and I believed maintaining these bonds was important, especially since Audrey had already lost her mother. This past December had been particularly difficult at the hospital. A combination of flu, COVID variants, and the usual holiday accidents had the emergency department constantly overwhelmed. When my colleague Frank Alvarez asked if anyone could cover his Christmas Day shift so he could be with his 4 young children, I volunteered. Frank had covered for me numerous times over the years, and his kids were at that magical age where Christmas morning still held wonder. "I'll work the double," I told the scheduling coordinator. "Audrey and I can celebrate on Christmas Eve and the day after." When I told Audrey about working Christmas, she was understanding as always. "It's okay, Dad. Dr. Alvarez deserves time with his kids." "You're sure? We can do our celebration on Christmas Eve instead." She nodded. "That works. What about Grandma and Grandpa's dinner, though?" Every year, my parents hosted Christmas dinner for the extended family. Traditionally, Audrey and I would arrive around 4 in the afternoon, after opening our own gifts at home. "I'll call Mom and explain. Maybe you could go without me this year. I'll pick you up when my shift ends around 11. Audrey hesitated, then shrugged. "I guess that would work." I should have paid more attention to her reluctance. I should have noticed how her shoulders tensed at the suggestion of attending alone. But between the hospital's chaos and the holiday preparations, I missed these warning signs. When I called my mother to explain the situation, she seemed more concerned about my absence than Audrey attending alone. "You're working on Christmas Day, really, Michael?" "Mom, I'm covering for Frank. His kids are young and he's covered countless shifts for me over the years." "Well, I suppose Audrey can still come. What time will you drop her off?" "Actually, she has her license now. She can drive herself." There was a pause on the line. "Oh, well, dinner's at 4 as always." Something in her tone should have alerted me, but I was distracted by an incoming trauma notification on my pager. "Great, thanks, Mom. I have to go. Tell Dad I'll see him on the 26th. That was the extent of our planning. A casual conversation that would lead to one of the most painful Christmas experiences of our lives. Christmas morning arrived with a light dusting of snow across our neighborhood. Despite needing to be at the hospital by 7, I woke early to share a special breakfast with Audrey. I made her favorite blueberry pancakes shaped like Christmas trees, a tradition Rebecca had started when Audrey was tiny. "Merry Christmas, kiddo," I said, placing a small wrapped package beside her plate. "Dad, I thought we were doing gifts tomorrow," she protested, though her eyes lit up. "Just a small one for today." She unwrapped it carefully to find a vintage camera lens I'd found at a specialty shop downtown. "This is a 50mm fixed lens. These are amazing for portraits." Her excitement made the early morning search through camera shops worth every minute. "Your mom used one just like it," I said. "I thought you might want to try it out." Audrey immediately attached it to her camera and took several test shots around our kitchen, exclaiming over the quality. "This is perfect, Dad. Thank you." She disappeared into her room and returned with a wrapped package. "I was going to make you wait until tomorrow too, but fair is fair." Inside was a framed black and white photograph she'd taken of Rebecca and me on our last anniversary before she got sick. I had never seen this particular shot before. "I found it going through Mom's old memory cards," Audrey explained. "I restored it and enhanced it a bit." The image captured a moment of pure joy between Rebecca and me dancing in our backyard under string lights. I couldn't remember who had taken the photo. Perhaps one of our friends at the small gathering we'd hosted. I couldn't finish the sentence as emotion closed my throat. "I know," Audrey said softly. "That's why I wanted you to have it." We embraced, both fighting tears before I reluctantly checked my watch. "I've got to get going. The ER won't staff itself." "Go save lives, Dad. I'll be fine." "You're sure you're okay going to Grandma and Grandpa's alone? I can call and explain if you'd rather skip it this year." Audrey shook her head. "No, it's tradition. Plus I made them gifts. She gestured toward carefully wrapped packages on the counter. I took some nice photos of their garden in summer and framed them. They'll love that, I assured her, though a small voice in my mind questioned whether my parents would truly appreciate the thoughtfulness behind her gift. What time are you heading over? Probably around 3:30. Dinner's at 4, right? Right. Text me when you get there. Okay. And drive carefully if the roads are slick. Dad, I've been driving for 6 months. I can handle a little snow. I hugged her once more before grabbing my travel mug of coffee and heading out into the cold morning. Little did I know that by the time I returned home, our family dynamic would be forever altered. The emergency department was exactly as chaotic as expected on Christmas Day. By 8 in the morning, we had already treated 3 heart attacks, likely induced by holiday stress, a child who had swallowed part of a new toy, and an elderly man who had fallen while hanging Christmas lights. The trauma bay was constantly cycling patients, many with alcohol-related injuries or holiday cooking accidents. At 3:45, between treating a teenager with a sledding injury and an adult experiencing severe allergic reaction to nuts in Christmas cookies, I received a text from Audrey. Just arrived at Grandma and Grandpa's, driveways packed with cars. Talk later. I quickly texted back, have fun. Love you. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of patience. A family of 4 brought in after a minor car accident, a woman in premature labor, an older gentleman with stroke symptoms that turned out to be Bell's palsy. Each case required my full attention, but in the brief moments between, I found myself checking my phone, expecting updates from Audrey about the family dinner. At 7:30, during a rare, quiet moment, I noticed a new message that had come in 20 minutes earlier. Heading home. Don't worry about me. The brevity and tone immediately sent warning signals through my mind. I stepped into the break room and called her cell. She answered on the 4th ring. Hey Dad. Audrey, is everything okay? You're leaving already. There was a pause. Yeah, dinner's over. I'm driving home now. But usually the family stays until at least 9 or 10. Did something happen? It's fine, Dad. We'll talk later. I know you're busy. Audrey, if something's wrong. I'm driving, Dad. I should go. The roads are a little icy. Okay, but call me when you get home safely. Will do. She disconnected before I could ask more questions. Unease settled in my stomach as I returned to the emergency room floor. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't leave my shift. We were short-staffed, and the waiting room was still full of patients needing care. About 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Diana. You really need to talk to Audrey about her attitude. She barely spoke to anyone, and then left abruptly. Mom went to a lot of trouble with dinner. I stared at the message, confusion and concern mounting. This didn't sound like Audrey at all. She was quiet, yes, but never rude. I started to type several responses but deleted them all. Without knowing what had actually transpired, I couldn't form a proper reply. At 8:15, Audrey texted that she was home safely. I tried calling during my break at 9, but she didn't answer. My mind created increasingly worrying scenarios as I treated patients with holiday emergencies. Had she argued with my parents? Had Diana's children said something hurtful? Was Audrey feeling ill and hiding it? The final hours of my shift dragged endlessly as my concern for my daughter grew. By the time I changed out of my scrubs at 11:30, I had received no further communication from either Audrey or my family members. The drive home through light snow felt ominous, my thoughts racing with possibilities of what could have gone wrong at what should have been a simple family dinner. I arrived home just after midnight to find the house mostly dark with only the porch light and a small lamp in the living room illuminating the space. Audrey's car was in the driveway covered with a thin layer of fresh snow, suggesting she'd been home for hours. Audrey, I called softly, as I entered unsure if she might be asleep. There was no response. I hung my coat by the door and moved through the quiet house, eventually finding her curled up on her bed, still fully dressed, scrolling through her phone. She wasn't asleep, but her puffy eyes suggested she'd been crying. "Hey," I said gently, sitting at the edge of her bed. "What happened tonight?" She shrugged, not making eye contact. "Nothing important." "Audrey, please?" Diana texted me saying something about your attitude, and you left dinner hours early. That doesn't sound like nothing. She sat up, setting her phone aside. "I just didn't feel comfortable staying." "Did someone say something to upset you?" Audrey looked down at her hands. "It doesn't matter, Dad. You were busy saving lives. This is just stupid family drama." "It's not stupid if it hurt you," I insisted. "Please tell me what happened." For several moments, she remained silent, and I waited patiently, knowing that pushing too hard would only make her withdraw further. Finally, she took a deep breath. When I got there, everyone was already seated in the dining room. Grandma was bringing out the ham. "Were you late?" I asked, confused. I was exactly on time. 4 o'clock, just like always. Her voice had a slight tremor. But when I went to put my coat away and took the presents to the tree, I came back, and there was no place set for me at the table. A cold feeling washed over me. "What do you mean?" The dining room table was full. Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Diana, Uncle Patrick, Jacob, Amanda, Great Aunt Judith, Uncle Steve, and Aunt Carol. With their kids. Everyone had a place. When I stood there looking confused, Grandma just glanced up and said, "Oh, Audrey, there's no room for you at this table. You can eat in the kitchen." I stared at her in disbelief. The kitchen. By yourself. Audrey nodded, tears forming in her eyes. She had set up a small television tray in there, like I was an afterthought. I couldn't even find words to express my shock. "It gets worse," Audrey continued, her voice strengthening as she finally released the story she'd been holding in. "When I went to put my gifts under the tree, Aunt Diana said I shouldn't have bothered, that they were doing a new gift exchange system this year that I wasn't part of since you weren't there. They excluded you from the gift exchange without telling us beforehand. Grandma said she assumed I wouldn't come without you, that it didn't occur to her I would show up alone." I ran my hand through my hair, trying to process this information. "But we specifically discussed you going alone. I talked to Mom about it." "Well," she acted surprised to see me. She kept saying things like, "Oh, we thought since Michael couldn't make it, and we just didn't plan for an extra person." Audrey paused, then continued with a steadier voice, as if having started her story, she was determined to reveal it all. "So, I went to the kitchen with my plate. I could hear everyone laughing and talking in the dining room. Jacob came in once to get more soda and asked why I was sitting alone. When I explained, he just shrugged and said, 'That's weird,' then went back to join everyone." My heart ached, imagining her eating alone while family celebrated just one room away. After dinner, I tried to join everyone in the living room. I sat on the floor since all the seats were taken. Grandpa started talking about Jacob's basketball scholarship offers, and then Amanda's violin recital. Aunt Diana asked me if I was still just taking pictures, or if I had found a real interest yet. She said that my anger was building with each new detail. Audrey nodded. Then Grandma asked if I had applied to any colleges yet, and before I could answer about the photography programs I'm researching, Aunt Diana said that creative arts degrees were expensive hobbies, and I should consider something practical, like Jacob. I closed my eyes briefly, imagining my daughter subjected to this dismissive treatment while I was miles away treating strangers. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked softly. "Because you were working. What could you have done? Left the ER on Christmas to come rescue me from Grandma's passive-aggressive comments?" She wiped away tears with the back of her hand. "Anyway, after about an hour of sitting there being ignored or criticized, I went to the bathroom. When I was coming back, I overheard them talking in the kitchen." Her voice dropped lower. "They were talking about you, Dad. About how you're failing as a parent by letting me waste time on photography instead of building a real future. Grandpa said you were too permissive, that Mom would be disappointed in how I'm turning out. That was the moment my blood truly began to boil. Using Rebecca's memory as a weapon against our daughter was unforgivable. Aunt Diana said you were still playing the widower card to avoid family obligations, and that's why you were working on Christmas instead of being there. Audrey's voice cracked. They had no idea I could hear everything. What did you do then? I asked, my own voice tight, with controlled fury. I went back to the living room, got my coat, and told Grandma I needed to leave. She asked why, and I just said I wasn't feeling well. Uncle Steve's wife Carol offered to drive me home, but I said I was fine to drive. Grandma insisted I take some leftovers, acting all concerned suddenly, but I just wanted to leave. And no one tried to convince you to stay. Aunt Diana made some comment about typical teenage dramatics as I was putting on my coat. That's it. Audrey looked up at me, her eyes reflecting hurt, but also a strange relief at having finally shared the truth. I've never felt so unwelcome in my life, Dad. It was like I wasn't even part of the family. I pulled her into a hug, feeling her tears soak into my shoulder. I am so sorry I wasn't there, and I'm sorry I didn't realize how bad things had gotten with them. After several minutes of just holding her, I asked, has this happened before? Not this extreme, but the criticism, the exclusion. Audrey pulled back, wiping her face. Not this obvious. Usually it's just comments, comparisons to Jacob and Amanda, questions about why I'm not more outgoing or involved in more activities. But they've never physically separated me from everyone before. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? She shrugged. You always seemed so determined for us to have this big family connection. And after Mom died, I didn't want to take away anything else from you. Her words hit me like a physical blow. My daughter had been enduring mistreatment to protect my feelings, to preserve what she thought I needed. Audrey, listen to me, I said, taking her hands. Nothing is more important to me than you. Not family traditions, not my parents' approval, nothing. I had no idea they were treating you this way. It's okay, Dad. No, it's not okay. Not even remotely. I stood up suddenly, energized by righteous anger. Are you hungry? I bet you didn't eat much of that dinner. She shook her head. Not really. Well, I'm starving after that shift. Let's go raid the refrigerator and have our own Christmas meal. In the kitchen, I pulled out leftovers from our Christmas Eve dinner the night before, microwave turkey and stuffing, and made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, another of our traditions. As we sat at our kitchen counter eating our midnight Christmas dinner, I made a silent vow that this situation would not continue. My parents and sister had crossed a line, and it was time I stood up for my daughter in a way I should have done years ago. After our impromptu midnight meal, neither Audrey nor I felt like sleeping. The revelation of how my family had treated her left me cycling through emotions, shock, guilt, and an overwhelming anger that threatened to consume me. I considered driving straight to my parents' house to confront them, but reason prevailed. Nothing productive would come from a middle-of-the-night confrontation fueled by raw emotion. Instead, Audrey and I moved to the living room with our hot chocolates, settling into the comfortable old sectional sofa that had witnessed so many movie nights, homework sessions, and heart-to-heart talks over the years. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, Audrey said, quietly staring into her mug. Maybe if I had been more outgoing like Amanda, or had achievements they valued like Jacob. Stop right there, I interrupted gently. This isn't about anything you did or didn't do. Their behavior was completely inappropriate and unkind, period. But why don't they like me, Dad? What did I do wrong? The vulnerability in her question broke my heart. I set my mug down and turned to face her directly. You have done absolutely nothing wrong. This is about their narrow expectations and judgments, not about who you are. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. Some people, even family, have very rigid ideas about what success looks like, what paths are valuable. They can't see beyond their own limited perspective. But they're always so proud of Jacob and Amanda. Jacob and Amanda are wonderful kids who happen to excel in areas that your grandparents and Aunt Diana value traditionally, academics and competitive activities. That doesn't make their paths better than yours, just different. Audrey pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. Last Thanksgiving, Grandpa asked me what colleges I was looking at. When I mentioned the photography programs at RISD and SVA, he laughed and asked if I had a backup plan for a real career. Why didn't you tell me about that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You were on call that weekend, remember? You got called back to the hospital right after dinner. And when you got home, you were so exhausted. She shrugged. It didn't seem important enough to bother you with. Each revelation was another twist of guilt in my stomach. How many times had Audrey protected me from knowing about these hurtful interactions? I want you to promise me something, I said firmly. From now on, you tell me when anyone, family included, makes you feel less than or dismisses your passions. That's important information for me to have. She nodded reluctantly. I just didn't want to create drama between you and your parents. After Mom died, they were there for us, and I thought, you thought you owed them tolerance of their bad behavior. I finished for her. Audrey's support that comes with conditions isn't really support. Real love doesn't require you to make yourself smaller or change who you are. We sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the occasional crackling from the gas fireplace I had turned on to combat the winter chill. What happens now? Audrey finally asked. Are we going to stop seeing them? The question hung in the air while I considered our options. Complete estrangement seemed extreme, but continuing as if nothing had happened was impossible. I think we need clear boundaries, I said slowly. Which means I need to communicate directly with them about what happened and what needs to change if they want to remain in our lives. They'll probably say I'm too sensitive or misunderstood the situation. Then they'll be proving exactly why we need boundaries. I reached over to squeeze her hand. I want you to know something important. Family isn't just about blood relations. Family is about who treats you with love, respect, and acceptance. Audrey's eyes filled with fresh tears. I miss Mom. She always stood up for me. She would be so proud of the person you're becoming, I assured her. And she would be furious about what happened today. She would have never let them treat me like that. The statement hit me hard, a stark reminder of how I had failed to protect Audrey from my own family's toxicity. You're right, I admitted. And I should have been more aware, more proactive, in shielding you from their criticism. It's not your fault, Dad. You were dealing with Mom's death too, and working and everything else. Her attempt to comfort me only intensified my determination to make this right. Maybe so, but things are going to change now. I promise you that. We talked until nearly 3 a.m, delving into other incidents I had missed or minimized over the years. A pattern emerged of subtle but persistent criticism directed at Audrey, and by extension my parenting. Each story reinforced my resolve to address this situation decisively. As dawn approached, Audrey finally fell asleep on the couch. I covered her with a blanket and went to my home office, where I spent the next 2 hours composing a letter to my parents and sister. The words flowed easily now that my priorities were crystal clear. When Audrey woke around 9, I had finalized my plan of action. I've written a letter, I told her over breakfast. I'd like you to read it before I deliver it to them. She looked surprised. You're giving them a letter, not just calling. This isn't a conversation that should happen over the phone, and I want to be very clear about my thoughts without interruption or deflection. Audrey read the letter carefully, her expression shifting from concern to relief as she processed my words. You really mean all this? She asked when she finished reading. Every word, I confirmed. I'm going over there at noon. Would you prefer to come with me, or stay here? She considered the question. I think I'll stay here. I don't think I can face them right now. That's completely understandable. I'll be back in a couple of hours, and then maybe we can salvage some of this Christmas Day with a movie marathon. She nodded. managing a small smile. That sounds good. As I prepared to leave, Audrey stopped me with a hug. Thank you for believing me, she whispered, and for standing up for me. Always, I promised, holding her tight. That's my job as your dad. The weight of responsibility settled firmly on my shoulders as I drove toward my parents' house letter tucked securely in my jacket pocket. For too long, I had prioritized family harmony over my daughter's emotional well-being. That ended today. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 20 minutes, giving me time to rehearse what I would say. The letter in my pocket contained everything I needed to express, but I wanted to be prepared for their reactions. Knowing my family, there would be defensiveness, deflection, and attempts to minimize what had happened. Their neighborhood was quiet on the day after Christmas, most homes still decorated with lights and wreaths. My parents' house, a colonial-style two-story, where I had grown up, looked peaceful with its tasteful holiday decorations. It was hard to reconcile this image of traditional family warmth with the cruelty Audrey had experienced here just yesterday. Both my parents' cars were in the driveway, along with Diana's SUV. I hadn't expected my sister to be here, but perhaps it was better to address everyone at once. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a small but deliberate signal that this was not a casual family visit. My father answered, surprise registering on his face. Michael, we weren't expecting you today. Come in. Come in. Harold Warren had always been an imposing figure in my life. At 68, he remained tall and straight, backed, his former military posture never quite relaxed, even in retirement from his engineering career. Is Audrey with you? He asked, looking past me to the driveway. No, I replied, simply following him into the house. In the living room, my mother Eleanor was seated in her favorite armchair, flipping through a magazine. Diana sat on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. Both looked up with varying degrees of surprise at my entrance. Michael, my mother said, setting aside her magazine. This is unexpected. Is everything all right? No, I said bluntly. Everything is not all right. The room fell silent. My father took a seat beside Diana on the sofa while I remained standing. If this is about yesterday, Diana began with a dismissive wave of her hand. Audrey was clearly in one of her moods. Teenagers, you know. This is absolutely about yesterday, I confirmed, but not in the way you seem to think. I removed the envelope from my jacket. I've written down my thoughts because I want to be very clear, and I don't want anything to be misunderstood or forgotten. My mother frowned. That seems rather formal for a family discussion, doesn't it? What happened yesterday went beyond a simple misunderstanding, Mom. This letter outlines what occurred, how it affected Audrey, and what needs to change moving forward. Without waiting for further commentary, I opened the envelope and began reading. To Harold, Eleanor, and Diana. Yesterday, on Christmas Day, while I was working to save lives in the emergency room, my 16-year-old daughter arrived at your home for what should have been a warm family gathering. Instead, she was told there was no room for her at the table. She was physically separated from the family, forced to eat alone in the kitchen, excluded from the gift exchange, and subjected to criticism and dismissive comments about her interests and future. Let me be absolutely clear, this treatment of Audrey was cruel, inappropriate, and reveals a pattern of behavior that I can no longer ignore or excuse. For years I have overlooked your thinly veiled criticism of both my parenting and Audrey herself. I wrongly prioritized maintaining family harmony over protecting my daughter from your judgment. That ends today. Audrey is a remarkable young woman. She is compassionate, creative, and resilient in ways that continue to amaze me. Her photography is not a hobby to be dismissed, but a genuine artistic talent and potential career path that I fully support. The fact that you cannot see her value beyond narrow definitions of success says far more about your limitations than hers. My late wife Rebecca and I agreed on our parenting approach. We believed in nurturing Audrey's natural interests, rather than forcing her into activities for the sake of college applications or social status. Rebecca would be incredibly proud of who Audrey is becoming, and deeply disappointed in how you have treated her. As for your comments about my working on Christmas Day, let me remind you that medicine is not a 9-to-5 profession. My colleague Frank Alvarez has 4 children under the age of 10. He has covered countless shifts for me over the years, particularly after Rebecca's death when I needed to be there for Audrey. Yesterday, I returned that favor. That's what colleagues and friends do for each other. It was not playing the widower card, or avoiding family obligations as you suggested. Moving forward, here are my non-negotiable expectations. 1. You will treat Audrey with respect. This means no more dismissive comments about her interests, no more unfavorable comparisons to her cousins, and absolutely no more using Rebecca's memory as a weapon against either of us. 2. You will acknowledge that I am a good father doing my best in difficult circumstances. Criticism of my parenting decisions ends now. 3. You will apologize to Audrey specifically for what happened yesterday without qualifications or excuses. Until these conditions are met, we will be taking a step back from regular family gatherings. This is not an ultimatum but a boundary. I value family, but not at the expense of my daughter's emotional well-being. The choice now lies with you. I hope you will reflect on your actions and recognize the need for change, but I am prepared to maintain this boundary indefinitely, if necessary. Michael. As I finished reading, the room remained completely silent. My father's face had reddened progressively throughout my recitation, while my mother looked stunned. Diana's expression had shifted from dismissive to defensive. Well, my father finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. It seems you've made up your mind about us, based on a teenager's dramatic retelling. No, Dad. I've made up my mind based on a pattern of behavior that culminated in yesterday's inexcusable treatment of my daughter. You're blowing this completely out of proportion, Diana interjected, so she had to sit in the kitchen. The dining room table was full. Was it full before you planned the seating, or did you deliberately not include her? I challenged. We didn't think she would come without you, my mother said, her voice small. That's not true and you know it. I specifically called and told you Audrey would be coming alone. My mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Even if there had been some miscommunication about the seating, I continued, that doesn't explain excluding her from the gift exchange, or the comments about her interests and future. We're just concerned about her prospects, my father said, his tone softening slightly, in an attempt at reasonableness. Photography isn't exactly a stable career path. That's not your decision to make or judge, Dad. Audrey is my daughter, and I support her pursuing what she loves. Michael, my mother tried again. We love Audrey. We just want what's best for her. What's best for her is unconditional support and respect, not criticism and exclusion. Diana stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous. You've always been too sensitive, Michael. And now Audrey is the same way. We can't walk on eggshells worrying about every little thing we say. Basic respect isn't walking on eggshells, Diana. And making a 16-year-old eat alone on Christmas isn't a little thing. So what now? My father demanded. You're going to cut us off because of one dinner. I'm establishing boundaries. I corrected him. As I said in the letter, how we proceed depends on your willingness to acknowledge the harm done and commit to treating Audrey with respect going forward. And an apology, my mother added quietly. You mentioned an apology. Yes. A sincere one, directly to Audrey. My father stood up, pacing the room with agitation. This is how you repay everything we've done for you and Audrey over the years. After Rebecca died, who was there? Who helped with childcare, with meals, with support? I've always been grateful for that support, Dad. But help that comes with the expectation of control, or the right to belittle, isn't really help at all. We've never belittled Audrey, my mother protested. Telling her that her passion is just a hobby, comparing her constantly to Jacob and Amanda, suggesting that her mother would be disappointed in her choices. What would you call that? No one had an answer for that. "I should go," I said, returning the letter to its envelope and placing it on the coffee table. "You have my number when you're ready to discuss this further." "That's it?" Diana asked incredulously. "You drop this bomb and just leave?" "I've said what I needed to say. The next step is yours." I moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Audrey mentioned you prepared leftovers for her to take home yesterday. Was that after you had already seated her separately and excluded her from the gift exchange?" My mother nodded reluctantly. "So the kindness came only after the harm was done. That's something to think about." With that, I left, closing the door firmly behind me. As I walked to my car, I heard raised voices from inside the house. They were arguing among themselves, perhaps already trying to reframe the narrative in a way that absolved them of responsibility. The confrontation had gone largely as expected. There had been denial, defensiveness, and attempts to minimize what had happened. But I had said my piece clearly and established firm boundaries. What happened next would depend on their capacity for self-reflection and change. As I drove home to Audrey, I felt a strange sense of relief despite the emotional intensity of the confrontation. For too long, I had compromised my daughter's well-being in an attempt to maintain family harmony. That burden had been lifted. Whatever came next, Audrey would know without doubt that I stood firmly in her corner. The immediate aftermath of my confrontation with my parents and sister was a flurry of text messages and voicemails, most expressing indignation rather than remorse. Diana sent a lengthy text suggesting I was overreacting and destroying the family over teen drama. My father left a terse voicemail about disrespect and ingratitude. My mother alone seemed somewhat reflective, her message, simply asking if we could talk again after everyone had calmed down. I showed none of these communications to Audrey. Instead, we spent the remainder of Christmas Day as promised, watching movies and enjoying leftovers. For the first time in months, I saw her truly relax, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The week between Christmas and New Year's was typically filled with family gatherings at my parents' house. This year, Audrey and I created our own traditions instead. We visited a photography exhibition she had been wanting to see, tried cooking new recipes together, and spent an afternoon volunteering at the local animal shelter. Something Rebecca had always done during the holidays. At work, I was surprised by the support I received when colleagues noticed my subdued mood, and I shared a simplified version of what had happened. "Family can be the source of our deepest wounds," said Linda Chen, one of our veteran nurses, after hearing my story. "Standing up for your daughter was absolutely the right thing to do." Frank Alvarez, whose Christmas shift I had covered, invited us to his family's New Year's Eve gathering. "No pressure," he assured me, "but Claudia always makes too much food, and the kids would love to see Audrey. Might be good for both of you to be around a somewhat functional family for a change." We accepted the invitation, and the contrast between the warm, chaotic Alvarez household and the rigid formality of my parents' home was striking. Frank's children, ranging from 4 to 9 years old, adored Audrey and begged her to take their pictures with the camera she had brought. Claudia Alvarez treated us like old friends rather than colleagues' family, insisting we take home containers of her homemade tamales and promising to teach Audrey her grandmother's secret recipe sometime. "This is what family gatherings should feel like," Audrey commented on our drive home. "Everyone just being themselves, no judgment." "The Alvarezes are good people," I agreed, glad to see her smiling after such a difficult week. As January began, I received a surprising email from my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who lived in Colorado and rarely kept in touch beyond holiday cards. Michael Eleanor called me quite upset about some Christmas drama. Her version sounded suspicious, so I thought I'd reach out directly. "How are you and Audrey really doing?" I appreciated her direct approach and responded honestly about what had occurred. Her reply came quickly. "I'm not surprised, unfortunately. Eleanor and Harold have always had very specific ideas about success and family roles. Diana learned from the best how to be judgmental. I experienced similar treatment when I chose to become an artist rather than pursuing the teaching career they thought appropriate for a woman of my generation. Sometimes, distance is the only healthy option. Please tell Audrey her great-aunt is very proud of her photographic pursuits and would love to see her work sometime. This unexpected alliance was heartening. I shared Patricia's message with Audrey, who immediately looked up her great-aunt's artwork online and discovered she was actually a well-respected sculptor, with pieces in several museum collections. How did I not know about her? Audrey wondered aloud. No one ever talks about Aunt Patricia's art. Probably because it doesn't fit the family narrative of what constitutes success, I suggested. The discovery of Patricia's artistic career inspired Audrey to reach out directly, initiating an email correspondence that quickly evolved into weekly video calls where they discussed art creative processes and the challenges of pursuing creative passions when others don't understand their value. January also brought an unexpected development from Diana. After nearly 3 weeks of defensive messages and attempts to convince me I was overreacting, her tone suddenly changed. Her son Jacob had experienced exclusion at a basketball team event, coming home in tears after older teammates had deliberately left him out of post-game activities. I've been thinking about what you said, Diana's message read. Seeing Jacob hurt made me realize how Audrey must have felt. I still think some of this was miscommunication, but I shouldn't have been so dismissive of her feelings or her interests. Would she be willing to talk to me? I shared the message with Audrey, making it clear the decision was entirely hers. I don't know, she said thoughtfully. Is she actually sorry? Or just sorry? Because now she knows how it feels when it happens to her kid. That's a fair question, I acknowledged. Sometimes people can only develop empathy through personal experience. The important thing is whether her understanding leads to genuine change. After consideration, Audrey agreed to a video call with Diana, with me present for support. The conversation was initially awkward, but evolved into something resembling genuine dialogue. I always thought you were just shy, or going through a phase, Diana admitted. I never considered that our family dynamic might be pushing you away. I'm not shy, Audrey explained patiently. I'm just selective about where I put my energy. And photography isn't a phase, it's my passion. Diana seemed to actually listen, asking questions about Audrey's photography projects and future plans, without immediately dismissing them as impractical. By the end of the call, there was a tentative truce, though I reminded both Diana and myself that real change would require consistent effort over time, not just one positive conversation. My mother reached out next, requesting a face-to-face meeting without my father present. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes, where Eleanor surprised me by arriving with a small photo album. These are pictures your father took before we were married, she explained, opening the leather-bound book to reveal black and white photographs of landscapes and street scenes. He was quite passionate about photography in his youth. The images were actually impressive, showing a clear eye for composition and light that I had never known my father possessed. What happened? I asked. Why did he stop? His father convinced him it wasn't a practical pursuit. My mother's expression was rueful. When he started engineering school, the camera was put away. He never picked it up again. The revelation cast my father's criticism of Audrey's photography in a new light. Perhaps his dismissal wasn't just about practicality, but about his own abandoned passion. I'm not excusing our behavior, my mother continued. What happened at Christmas was wrong. I got caught up in managing everything perfectly, and didn't stop to consider Audrey's feelings. And your father. Well, he's struggling with his own regrets, though he'd never admit it. It wasn't quite the straightforward apology I had hoped for, but it was a step toward understanding. We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering years of miscommunications and unspoken expectations. By the time we parted, my mother had promised to speak with my father about meeting with us, though she warned it might take time for his pride to allow such a conversation. My father proved more resistant to reconciliation. February arrived with no direct communication from him, though my mother reported he was thinking about things. I didn't push, recognizing that meaningful change couldn't be forced, especially with someone as stubborn as Harold Warren. Meanwhile, Audrey was flourishing in the absence of constant family criticism. She joined the photography club at school, connecting with other students who shared her passion. Her grades improved as well, perhaps because she was no longer constantly anxious about family gatherings and judgments. Most significantly, she began submitting her work to student competitions and local exhibitions. When one of her photographs was selected for display at a community art center, the quiet pride in her expression was worth every difficult conversation and boundary established over the previous months. The most surprising development came in late February, when my father unexpectedly appeared at our house one Saturday afternoon. Audrey was out with friends from the photography club, so we spoke alone in the kitchen, an unusual tension between us. "Eleanor showed me the letter again," he said after declining my offer of coffee. "Made me read it properly this time." I waited, giving him space to continue, at his own pace. "I wasn't fair to Audrey," he finally admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. "Or to you." It wasn't a full apology, but from my father, this acknowledgement was significant. "Mom showed me your old photographs," I said. "They're really good." His expression shifted, surprise, and something like nostalgia crossing his face. "She kept those old things." "She did. Audrey would probably love to see them. And to hear about your interest in photography." He shook his head slightly. "That was a lifetime ago." "It's never too late to reconnect with something that once brought you joy, Dad." We talked for nearly an hour, more openly than we had in years. While he never directly apologized for Christmas, he did ask if Audrey might be willing to show him some of her recent work. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one, from a man who had previously dismissed her passion entirely. When I relayed the conversation to Audrey later, she was cautiously optimistic. "Do you think he really wants to see my photos, or is he just trying to make peace?" "Maybe a bit of both," I answered honestly. People are complicated, especially when confronting their own mistakes. But I think there's genuine interest there. You can decide if and when you're ready to share your work with him. As winter began to yield to early spring, our family dynamic continued its slow transformation. Diana's initial empathy evolved into more consistent respect for Audrey's choices. My mother made regular efforts to connect with Audrey on her terms, asking about photography projects without judgment. My father remained more distant, but had stopped dismissing Audrey's artistic pursuits as impractical. Not every interaction was perfect. Old habits occasionally resurfaced in subtle comments or assumptions. When they did, I addressed them immediately, rather than letting them pass for the sake of harmony. Each time the corrections became easier, the defensive reactions less intense. By the time Audrey's spring photography exhibition opened in March, she felt comfortable enough to invite my parents and Diana's family. Their attendance was a quiet acknowledgement of her talent and dedication, even if they didn't fully understand her artistic vision. "I never expected Grandpa to actually come," Audrey whispered to me as we watched him studying her photographs with surprising attention. "People can surprise us," I replied, squeezing her shoulder. "Sometimes even in good ways." The path forward remained uncertain. Some wounds heal slowly, and trust once broken requires time and consistent effort to rebuild. But as I watched my daughter confidently explaining her artistic choices to interested visitors at her exhibition, I knew we had made the right decision in establishing boundaries that allowed her to thrive. The painful Christmas incident had forced a necessary reckoning, opening the possibility for healthier relationships built on mutual respect, rather than conformity to narrow expectations. Whether all these relationships would fully heal remained to be seen. But Audrey and I had discovered something valuable through the process. We were stronger together than I had realized, capable of creating our own definition of family, based on genuine acceptance and support. 6 months after that pivotal Christmas summer arrived with warm breezes and new possibilities, Audrey and I had settled into a different rhythm with my family. one built on cautious optimism rather than obligation. My mother Eleanor had made the most consistent effort to repair her relationship with Audrey, regularly inviting her for lunch dates, where they would discuss everything from photography to college plans, without the critical undertone that had previously characterized their interactions. Grandma asked to see my portfolio for the summer photography workshop Audrey mentioned one evening, as we prepared dinner together. She actually seemed interested in the techniques I was learning. "That's great," I replied, genuinely pleased by this development. "She's really trying." "Yeah, she is." Audrey chopped vegetables thoughtfully. "It's weird but nice." She even defended my interest in the art school programs when Uncle Steve made some comment about practical education last week. These small shifts represented significant progress. Eleanor had taken my boundaries seriously, making genuine efforts to understand and support Audrey, rather than trying to reshape her into someone else's image of success. Diana's journey toward greater empathy continued as well, though, with occasional stumbles. After her initial realization triggered by Jacob's experience with exclusion, she had begun to recognize other patterns in her parenting and interactions that mirrored our parents' approach. During a family barbecue in June, I overheard her telling a neighbor about Audrey's photography being featured in a local arts magazine. "My niece has such a unique perspective," she said, genuine pride in her voice. "She captures moments most people would miss completely." Later that same afternoon, however, she slipped into old habits, making a passing comment about how Audrey might supplement her photography career with something more stable. When I raised an eyebrow, she caught herself and apologized without prompting. "Old habits," she acknowledged ruefully. "I'm working on it." The most complex evolution was with my father. Harold Warren had never been a man comfortable with emotional vulnerability or admitting mistakes. His way of making amends came through subtle actions rather than words. In April, a package arrived for Audrey containing a high-quality camera bag with multiple compartments and weather protection. "Grandpa said he noticed my current bag was getting worn," Audrey explained, surprised by the thoughtful gift. "He actually researched which ones professional photographers recommend." More significant was his gradual willingness to share his own abandoned photographic past. During a rare one-on-one lunch, he brought along some of his old cameras and photography books. "Technique has changed with digital, of course," he told Audrey, "but the principles of composition are timeless." These moments of connection didn't erase the hurt of the Christmas incident or the years of criticism that preceded it, but they represented my father's limited but genuine attempt to find common ground with his granddaughter on her terms, rather than his. Not every relationship had been salvageable. My father's brother, Uncle Steve, remained dismissive of Audrey's artistic pursuits, and my boundaries around how she would be treated. After several interactions where he continued to make belittling comments, despite clear requests to stop, I made the decision to limit our contact with that branch of the family. Some people aren't capable of the self-reflection necessary for change. I explained to Audrey, after a particularly unpleasant exchange with Steve at a family gathering. It's okay to maintain distance from relationships that remain harmful, even if they're family. This selective approach to family relationships proved healthier than the all-or-nothing participation that had previously been expected. We attended gatherings where we felt welcomed and respected, and declined those that seemed likely to undermine Audrey's confidence or our boundaries. Perhaps the most unexpected development came from outside our immediate family circle. The support network that emerged in the absence of traditional family connections enriched our lives in ways I hadn't anticipated. Frank and Claudia Alvarez became regular fixtures in our weekend plans, their children adopting Audrey as an honorary big sister. Linda Chen from the hospital introduced Audrey to her daughter, who ran a small photography business, resulting in a summer internship opportunity. Audrey's great-aunt Patricia, after months of virtual mentorship, invited Audrey to spend 2 weeks at her Colorado studio during summer break. The experience proved transformative, immersing Audrey in a community of working artists who validated her creative vision and offered practical guidance about pursuing arts, education, and career paths. They talk about art as a legitimate profession, Audrey told me during our nightly phone calls while she was in Colorado, not as a hobby or something to do on the side. Aunt Patricia introduced me to gallery owners and college professors who take my work seriously. When Audrey returned from Colorado, the change in her was remarkable. She carried herself with new confidence, speaking about her creative goals, without the hesitation or defensiveness that criticism from my family had previously instilled. As her senior year of high school approached, Audrey made a decision that would have been unthinkable before our Christmas reckoning. "I'm applying early decision to Rhode Island School of Design," she announced one evening. "It's my first choice, and Aunt Patricia thinks my portfolio is strong enough for a scholarship application." "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely thrilled by her clarity and confidence. "I think it's perfect for you. I know Grandpa still hopes I'll consider state schools with more practical majors as backups," she acknowledged. "But this is my path, Dad. I'm sure of it." "Then we'll make it happen," I promised. When Audrey shared her decision with my parents during a Sunday dinner in August, I watched carefully for their reactions. My mother offered congratulations without qualification, asking thoughtful questions about the program and campus. My father's response was more measured, but lacked the dismissive quality that would have been automatic a year earlier. "It's very competitive," he noted, but then added something that surprised us both. "But you've got real talent, Audrey. More than I ever did with a camera." The acknowledgement brought tears to Audrey's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. "Thanks, Grandpa. That means a lot." Later that evening, as Audrey and I drove home under a sky painted with sunset colors she would have once stopped to photograph, she reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. "You know what's weird, Dad? If Christmas hadn't gone so horribly, we might still be stuck in the same pattern. Me feeling constantly judged but never saying anything. You trying to keep everyone happy, at the expense of what we needed." Her insight struck me with its wisdom. Sometimes it takes a breaking point to create necessary change. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately," Audrey continued. "About what she would think of everything that's happened." "She would be incredibly proud of you," I said without hesitation. "Your resilience, your talent, the way you've learned to value yourself." "And you," Audrey added. "She'd be proud of you too for standing up for me even when it was hard." The mention of Rebecca brought both sadness and warmth. In the years since her death, I had often found myself wondering what she would advise in difficult parenting moments. The Christmas confrontation had been the first time I'd felt absolute certainty about what she would have wanted me to do. As summer transitioned into fall, and Audrey began her senior year, the transformation in our lives continued to unfold in both subtle and significant ways. The college application process that might once have been fraught with family tension instead became an opportunity for Audrey to clearly articulate her vision for her future. When her early decision acceptance to RISD arrived in December, along with a substantial merit scholarship, the celebration included not only friends, but also family members, who had learned to appreciate Audrey for who she truly was, rather than who they thought she should be. The approaching holiday season inevitably brought reflections on the previous Christmas that had catalyzed so much change. Rather than returning to my parents' house and risking painful memories, we decided to host our own small gathering at our home. To my surprise, my parents and Diana's family readily accepted the change in tradition. "I think they're a little relieved, actually," Diana confided when we discussed plans. "Last year left everyone with regrets, even if some won't admit it directly." Our Christmas Eve dinner was smaller than my parents' traditional gathering, but warmer in all the ways that mattered. Audrey's photography was displayed prominently throughout our home, a visual reminder of the talent that had once been dismissed. My father spent time examining each piece, occasionally asking questions about technique or inspiration. As we sat around our dining table, every person present and accounted for with a proper place setting, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. True family is defined not by blood relation, but by respect, acceptance, and genuine support. Boundaries, though difficult to establish, are essential for healthy relationships. People have the capacity to change when confronted with the impact of their actions, though change happens at different rates and to different degrees. Perhaps most importantly, standing up for what is right, especially in protection of those who depend on us, is never the wrong choice, even when it creates temporary discomfort or conflict. Watching Audrey laugh with her cousins, confidently sharing stories about her college plans, I knew with certainty that the painful confrontation of last Christmas had been necessary. Through that difficult experience, both Audrey and I had found our voices and redefined our understanding of family on healthier terms. As the evening drew to a close, my mother pulled me aside, her expression unusually vulnerable. "I want to thank you, Michael," she said softly. "What you did last year was difficult, but right. It made us all examine behaviors we'd never questioned. Our family is healthier now, because you had the courage to speak up." Her acknowledgement was unexpected but deeply appreciated. "It wasn't easy," I admitted, "but some things are worth fighting for." "Audrey is fortunate to have a father who understands that," she replied, glancing toward my daughter, who was showing my father how to use her new digital camera. "Rebecca would be proud of the parent you've become." The mention of Rebecca from my mother without manipulation or judgment felt like the closing of a circle. Perhaps we had finally reached a place where her memory could be honored authentically rather than weaponized. As we move forward into this new chapter of our lives, with Audrey preparing for college and new creative challenges, I carry these hard-won insights with me. The painful Christmas that tested our family bonds ultimately strengthened them in unexpected ways, transforming superficial connections into deeper, more authentic relationships, based on genuine acceptance rather than conformity. Have you ever had to stand up to family members to protect someone you love? What boundaries have you needed to establish in your own relationships? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing we can do is stand firm in protection of those who depend on us, even when it means facing difficult conversations. Thank you for listening to our journey, and I wish you courage in navigating your own family relationships with both compassion and necessary boundaries.